Well, I thought that was going to loop a little bit.
Hello, everybody. Are we able to hear each other? Yes.
Yeah, but we still have more people to join, so maybe we can wait a little bit longer.
Okay, but they can still see the video now.
Yeah. We're live, so people can see us. All five of us.
Okay. So no longer the video. What they're seeing now is
we can go back to the video. We can go back to the video.
No, it's all right. It's all right. It's all right.
Yeah.
It's just good to know that that we are online. Okay.
Yeah.
I think we shouldn't wait too long with starting. It would be nice if we start more or less in time. So 1 more minute and then we're going to start. And we are recording anyway, so if people want to watch later, they can. So could you maybe indeed put up the video for 1 more minute and then start?
Yeah.
Welcome, everybody, to the very first Cenex webinar. So this is a very first for all of us. So we're trying to get to know our platform and figuring out how it works, but very happy to have you here. We are in a very professional digital studio hosted by Pablo, who some of you might have seen just before while we were, all 5 of us were in the image, but you won't see much of him, but thank you for being there, Pablo. And for those of you who don't know me, I'm Sanne van Breukelen. I work for Cenex Nederland for 2.5 years now on sustainable mobility. I'm the team lead for transport and mobility. And so this is the number 1 of a series of webinars that we hope will be beneficial to a broad audience, for those who are already working on the electrification of fleets or sustainable mobility in some way, but also for those who are new to the topic and just looking to get some information. So we hope it's relevant to all of you. So very welcome. And obviously, we could not do this without very important speakers. So I would like to welcome all 3 of you. Michael Ayers from Flexible Power Systems, Daniel Speth for Fraunhofer, and my colleague Rishab. So could you please introduce yourself?
Sure, Sanne, thanks for having us This morning, my name is Michael Ayres from Flexible Power Systems. We're a software company, and fleets use our software tools to manage electric vehicles and charging infrastructure in real time.
Thank you. Daniel?
Yeah, my name is Daniel from Fraunhofer ISI, located in Karlsruhe, Germany. We are doing research on, well, let's say all types of innovation. I joined the institute 6 years ago, and my special topic is the electrification of heavy-duty trucks.
Thank you. And Rishab?
Everyone, my name is Rishab Ghodge. I work at Synex NL. We're based in Amsterdam. I'm in the Energy and Infrastructure department, and mainly I focus on electrification infrastructure and charging systems. In the recent past, I've mainly been working with heavy-duty vehicles. So that includes buses, trucks, and vans. Thanks. And it's really nice to talk here.
All right. Thank you. Yes, and our very first topic is indeed electric trucks, or the electrification of trucks. So, yeah, the thing is, basically, when we started thinking about topics for the webinars, we thought, electric trucks is a topic where we feel people are still saying they're hard to electrify. While we are seeing around us, for example, among our partners such as yourselves, that maybe it's not so hard to electrify because it's actually happening already. So we thought that might be actually a first interesting theme to discuss. And that's why the question that we're talking about today is: e-trucks, are they still hard to electrify? So just to let the viewers know a little bit of what is coming, could you give us a first idea of an answer to that question? What do you think, Michael and Daniel? Are they still hard to electrify?
I think electric trucks are not hard to electrify in the way that sort of people were thinking about 10 years ago. But I don't think electric trucks sit in the same category as, say, sort of aviation or some aspects of industrial process technology, because, as you say, that the technology is here now, that fleets are using them in real world operations. But there's undoubtedly a number of challenges that need to be overcome if we want to get to sort of much higher penetration levels.
All right, thanks. Daniel?
Yeah, so maybe the scientific answer, it depends. And yeah, as Michael already said, I think there is a large share that is easier to electrify than we might thought some years ago, but there are some challenges, and I don't think it's a good idea to just say, well, let's skip those challenges and say it's all easy. So I think let's start with the easy part and think about the questions or problems that may arise.
All right, thanks. Yeah, and then we're going towards our first presentation. In the preparation for this webinar, we had a very lively conversation with you, Michael, on the topic. And I basically asked you to make a presentation with if you could, a lot of pictures and concrete examples. And I think you did just that for us. So yeah, whenever you're ready, please go ahead.
So thanks very much, Anna, for sort of leading me in. Firstly, I appreciate that sort of not everybody on this call will have come across Flexible Power Systems before. We're a software company that we focus on the commercial vehicle sector. So we deal sort of exclusively with sort of vans, trucks, and transport refrigeration units. And our customers use our software tools to both plan their EV transitions and to manage their vehicles and charging infrastructure in real time. That most of our experience comes from the logistics arena, but we also are active in the retail space, rail environment, and for some public sector organisations in the UK. Quite a few of our customers now have electric trucks running in their operations. There's a few reasons why that those vehicles are present there. There's a sense with many of these operators that adoption of electric trucks is something they're going to have to do at some point. So that might be because of organizational sustainability or net zero targets. Some of our customers are pulled by their customers. So, for example, the National Health Service in the UK demands that all fleets have carbon reduction plans, and so they have to have a pathway to net zero. And you can't really achieve net zero without sort of the change in the fuel type that the vehicles are using. There's also a sense that local and national legislation is going to make it harder and harder to operate diesel vehicles. So that may be air quality restrictions in urban areas or national level sort of phase outs of diesel vehicle sales. For a number of these operators, it's sort of quite a good time to do this type of work. So in our market, we have a number of sort of early adopter incentives, so that there are government initiatives like the Zero Emission Heavy Duty Infrastructure Demonstrator Program, where the fleets are benefiting from as much as 80% subsidy in terms of both vehicles and charging infrastructure. But there are also quite attractive OEM deals in the marketplace that effectively amount to sort of rentals of these trucks for sort of initial periods of 12 months that are at prices which are comparable to diesel vehicles. And so now is a very good time to sort of start building experience of what you need to do in order to make electric trucks a success. So these are a few of the examples of sort of customers that we work with. The first one is a company called Welch's. They're a pallet network operator serving a sort of eastern region in the United Kingdom. That they're actually operating rigid body electric trucks and 4x2 tractor units. Interestingly, they're supporting those vehicles initially off a single 150 kilowatt charger that they're also further leveraging by sort of sharing that with other fleets in the area that are operating electric trucks to improve its return on investment, and that experience has led to them investing in a charging hub which they're building somewhere else in the country, which will service both their trucks and also other fleets. At the other end of the 3PL scale, that you have a company called Wincanton, who are using currently electric trucks in their IKEA operation that we help them with that. They started up with about 10 17-ton rigids, and they're now expanding it to around about 20 vehicles. They're quite an interesting fleet because I think that some of the experiences they have will be what we see in this industry as the electric truck deployment scale, so that they do suffer range constraints that impact their operation. They're servicing such a large region for sort of flat pack delivery, but that they're getting around those range constraints by accessing third-party infrastructure and using public charging networks to expand what they can do with their vehicles. And that type of active management and optimization is likely to be what many fleets will need to do to try and get towards sort of feasible and cost-effective operations at scale. Bottom left, the sort of tractor unit can see pulling a Shreddies trailer. That's Nestle, a food producer. They're interesting because they actually have a very small fleet. They have sort of less than 20 vehicles that they run in the UK. However, they're responsible for thousands of vehicle movements a day from their transport suppliers. And the reason that they're deploying electric trucks into their operation is to try and generate learning and knowledge that will enable their transport suppliers to decarbonize, so that Nestle itself can hit its net zero targets. And they're actively trying to help them by deploying sort of more chargers than they need around their estate, and that those chargers are intended both to support these trucks, but also the third-party logistics providers on which they rely. And then the sort of final example is a retailer in the UK called the John Lewis Partnership. Those guys are trialing a variety of different truck products from sort of Volvo, Scania, and now DAF. They've actually invested in relatively high power charging infrastructure, 250 kilowatt chargers, and they're using that charging infrastructure to drive up sort of truck utilization so they can multi-shift the vehicles, but they're also using that infrastructure to generate income from sharing that infrastructure with other fleets who are trying to access chargers. Then we talk a little bit about the challenges that sort of immediately spring to mind with electric trucks. Range is probably sort of top of mind for everyone. I'd point out that range is already enough for quite a few duty cycles that these operators see in their businesses, that it's not a question if you can only do sort of one or two sort of parts of the operation, that people are sort of getting as high as sort of 40 or 50% of sort of duty cycles, even with the sort of first generation technology like Volvo FM tractor units. We've got an eActros joining sort of one of our customers' fleets later this week, which Mercedes have told us will do 500 kilometers range, fully laden under sort of normal conditions, which is a sort of pretty big step up from just a couple of years ago with the Volvo FM tractor unit. And I imagine a number of you will have seen the announcement from Renault of a sort of 600 kilometer range vehicle, which is coming next year. And that's being driven by platform changes up at the higher end of that, as people begin to sort of move away from a model which is perhaps getting a diesel vehicle and strapping lots of batteries onto it, to sort of having more specialized sort of chassis and vehicle platforms that can be more efficient. Cost is a sort of another issue, which sort of frequently comes up and is certainly a barrier to sort of wider deployment. It's absolutely true that vehicles and chargers are expensive. However, there are already niche business cases, which I think sort of Rishabh will talk about a little bit. If you're interested in the UK context, that QR code takes you to a sort of TCO tool we built with a UK truck dealer, so you can see sort of what UK economics look like. But costs are also coming down sort of pretty rapidly, and that's driven by declines in battery pack prices, e-machine prices, and also sort of increasing production volumes and making the platforms more specialized. That's not to say that if we want to get to sort of very high penetrations, that some kind of help for the industry would be required, perhaps in terms of access to capital or sort of changes to things like sort of payload constraints. For me, the biggest challenge still faced by sort of electric trucks is around infrastructure. Fleets have quite diverse needs, and the fit with sort of EHGVs is not perfect with sort of any of the solutions available at the moment. So depot charging for many operators is likely to be the cheapest route. However, the sort of local power constraints and the investment costs for sort of establishing that infrastructure are sort of quite significant. At the other end of the scale, some of the charge point operator networks which have been established for cars are now trying to serve EHGV customers. So a number of the UK CPO operators, when they build new sites now, are building sites with EHGV bays in them. Somewhere in between sort of those totally public networks and depot charging, you've got the OEM supported networks like Milence. I think that they're interesting and will play a critical role because firstly, that there's a sort of focus on truck needs when deciding where to locate them. And secondly, because they're OEM backed, that they're trying to facilitate electric truck uptake, and so that they can maybe sort of enter the market at slightly different price points as sort of public networks. And then the sort of final thing that I wanted to draw your attention to is the potential for infrastructure sharing and making that infrastructure bookable. Accessing other fleets' infrastructure is quite an interesting thing to do because it's likely to be cheaper than public networks. It may be in locations that are more convenient for your fleet than the public network. And actually, if you own a significant amount of infrastructure because your trucks are out working most of the time, that your charges by definition will therefore not be used very heavily. And so there could be opportunities to sort of improve the business case for that infrastructure by making it available to third-party fleets. But there's a lot that you need to manage with that. So that we're actually running some trials in the UK market at the moment with fleets who want to share infrastructure with each other, and how do you manage that process? It's a bit of a whistle-stop tour of everything going on in EHGV and the sort of FPS universe in the UK. Be happy to take sort of any questions that come up, or if you want to ask me something directly, in my contact details on the slide. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that, Michael. That was a very great introduction into the topic and a nice overview of what's going on with some very clear examples. If you look at these examples, would you say that these organizations that you've described, are they still front runners?
It's an interesting question. So I think that a couple of years ago, that the people that we'd be talking about would be seen as kind of front runners, but what we're actually seeing now is that we think we're into a kind of fast followers stage in the marketplace, where seeing examples of there are multiple sort of pallet network small fleet operators in the UK now who are taking their first few electric vehicles into the fleet. It's not mass adoption yet, but that people are taking the first steps. So it's absolutely not that, I don't know, DAF have produced 2 prototype vehicles and placed them into fleets, or something like the BET trials which Cenex UK hosted sort of 3 or 4 years ago, where it was just sort of 20 vehicles and that's all that there were in the UK, that these vehicles are arriving and being deployed in a sort of quite wide range of use cases. Yeah.
And what do you think drives these companies to start working with electric fleets? Is it with environment in mind, or is it economically? What do you think?
I think that for many fleets, there's a sense that doing this is becoming inevitable, that it's a thing that is going to happen at some point. And some of the fleets that we work with recognize, firstly, that going early means that you're still in the stage where that you get credit for doing it, rather than being seen that there's a laggard who is dragging their heels and not doing it, so that there are sort of upsides. Sort of Welch Group in particular get a sort of very large amount of sort of publicity and attention in the UK market because of their sort of commitments to sustainability. And then I think also that some of the sort of more forward-thinking fleets are looking at what happened in the bus sector in the UK. So that the bus market in the UK was absolutely driven by subsidy and and then we got to a kind of tipping point in terms of the amount of vehicles which were deployed, where people worked out actually you could make a business case work for electric buses, and it's more attractive than diesel buses. And so that the operators who figured out how to make electrification work in their fleets are the people who've kind of cleaned up and taken over the market. If you look at sort of leaders like First Bus, with all of the different levers they pulled to get the business case to stack up, and the fact that they're effectively just taking over other regions and other operators now on the strength of that economic. I think the same thing will happen in our sector, the logistics industry, because it's so cost sensitive. When we get the recipe right, that whoever is sort of at the forefront of that is going to have a huge advantage over the people who are sort of only just figuring out what to do.
Yeah. That's what we said, indeed, in the preparations as well, right? The transition is happening. In 5 years, you will not be buying diesel trucks probably, but it's just that in the mindset, there still has to be a bit of a shift, I think. For a lot of people, it still feels like it's something in the far away future, but it might not be as far away as you think it is. That's
I think so. I have a lot of sympathy for sort of fleet operators because there's so many competing priorities.
Oh, sure.
Be worrying about sort of driver shortage, safety, sort of short-term sort of regulations, still bits of Brexit fallout and things like that. And so fitting this in, which can feel sort of remote, can be really difficult. But I think if there are opportunities for learning which are generated by the fact that OEMs want to shift vehicles at the moment, and that you can convert that learning into sort of business advantage in future.
Yeah, no, I agree with you there. There's definitely a lot that's coming towards these companies, and we've talked also about especially small family businesses. It's not easy. You also just have your core business to worry about, and then you have this extra topic to worry about. So it's not easy, and that's exactly, I think, why all of us try to make it more easy for them. And they can always reach out if they want to know more. And then thank you, Michael. Thank you again for your presentation. And then to go to our next speaker, we also already said there's a lot of myths going around about trucks and electric trucking and the transition to sustainable mobility. And I think, Daniel, you will help us bust some of those myths using science, but as you said, also in a catchy way. I look forward to your presentation. So the floor is all yours.
Well, thank you for the introduction. Yes, I hope it is catchy. We will see. But basically, when I prepared those slides, it was the basic idea to think about, well, what are the questions our customers, so different logistic companies, ask us when we start a project with them? And I took basically 3 of them. The first topic is on range and technical feasibility. The second one is on driving behavior, economic feasibility, and last but not least, that issue of electricity grid connection. And I took one quote for each of those parts, let's say, and tried to give you some, let's say, maybe scientific insights on how we try to show our customers what we think about that and what is possible and what is potentially also not possible. Well, range and technical feasibility. When we start projects, there's often this comment like, compared to our diesel trucks, the range of battery electric trucks is way too low. We already saw it in the last presentation. Well, let's dig a little bit into the situation we have today. As shown a minute ago, we have some kind of a first generation of battery electric trucks now, something like 300 kilometer range. And those trucks are good to, let's say, do regional logistics, often also garbage trucks, urban delivery. Those are the topics that can be fulfilled today quite good with electric trucks, like annual mileages up to 100,000 kilometers, or let's say a little bit of weight loss for sure. But what's coming now is a kind of a second generation of trucks, like the Daimler eActros 600 we have seen a minute ago also. So trucks that are really able to do long haul logistics, 500 kilometer range, which is quite good for typical daily range. And then there is, let's say, some kind of a extra benefit when it comes to megawatt charging. So this megawatt charging system that is currently under development, we will potentially open the first public megawatt charging station in Germany in, I don't know, something like 4 to 5 weeks. So this is really happening. And then it will be possible to recharge a truck within 45 minutes within the mandatory break of the drivers. So technique-wise, the development is rapidly growing. But what does that mean if we have a range of 500 kilometers a day? On the right-hand side of the slide, you see a distribution of the daily mileage of a representative German fleet. It's approximately 2,500 vehicles, representative for the German truck fleet. And if we have a look at this sketch of 500 kilometers, we see that, let's say, far more than 50%, it's something like almost 80% of the vehicles travel less than 500 kilometers a day. So those vehicles can be, let's say, from a range perspective, electrified with one charging event per day, so one overnight charging event. However, this is somehow a simplified way to view at the topic, just to say, well, we have the daily range because there's variation and so on. But in general, it looks quite good. What we did in the next step is to simulate those 2,500 vehicles as battery electric trucks throughout a day. So starting at midnight and ending at midnight. And on the left-hand side, you can see their behavior throughout the day. Basically, the vehicles start driving in the early morning hours, driving throughout the day, coming back to the depots in the evening. And most of them can charge with really low power, something like less than 50 kilowatt, mostly at the depots. This is this topic of depot charging will be the key to electrify the fleets. Yeah, and only a minor share, potentially something like 10 to 20%, will really regularly need public charging, public megawatt charging as intermediate charging in the midday hours. If you have a look at the right-hand side, you see that 450 kilometer range bar. Assuming a range of 450 kilometers, so what's absolutely possible with today's trucks, we can electrify about 60% of the fleet by just one charging event per day. So technically overnight charging. If we allow a second stop, another 30% can be electrified. For sure, when looking into mileage, it's a little bit less because technically it's easier to electrify trucks that do not drive so much, but there is a high share of trucks that can be electrified, especially if the depots are electrified. Let's go with the second quote. It's more about driving behavior and economic feasibility. When we talk to trucking companies, they are telling us, well, our trucks are always driving. A running truck is a truck gaining money, and there's no time for recharging and doing extra stops. For sure, this is correct. However, I'm always asking, well, so your truck has something like 3 drivers a day, or is it 1 or 2? Because if we only have 1 driver, the truck can't run more than 10 hours a day. But yes, so we try to really understand how those trucks behave throughout the day. And I took one example from a study that is already quite old. It's a study from 2021. And it's from the German food logistics group Rewe. So their delivery structure to serve their markets with goods. And what we actually did is we looked at one region. It's the northeast of Germany. You can see it on the right-hand side of the map. And what we can see, they have 2 logistics centers there, and one is quite in the is delivering Berlin. It's the black area here. It's called Mariendorf, and the second one is Oranienburg, delivering the whole northeast of Germany. And those trucks typically drive up to 600, 700 kilometers per day, some of them. So even they do something like regional logistics, they have a lot of mileage. And in 2021, it was completely technically possible to electrify the fleet that delivers the Berlin city area. For the long distance trucks or the regional delivery in the Northeast region, it was a little bit more complicated. For solo trucks, it was quite easy. You can see the green bars. They were, almost all of them were electrifiable, even in 2021 without intermediate charging. And for the tractor-trailer or truck-trailer combinations, it was a little bit more complicated since the batteries were just too small these days. And it was approximately, let's say, 60% or 50% of the fleet in medium that could have been electrified in 2021. However, it's not only about technical electrification, it's also about the economic aspect. So on the left-hand side, I really like this figure because it makes clear the problem some logistic companies have with electrification. On the one hand, the higher your annual mileage is, the more you can gain with an electric truck. Because when running costs for the electric trucks are typically lower than for the diesel trucks. So whenever the truck drives, you can gain money. On the other hand, the more the truck drives, the more complicated it is to make the trips feasible because you need the brakes to recharge and so on. So the question, especially in an early phase of electrification, is to find the sweet spot that gains enough money to electrify this, to make it economically competitive, but on the other hand, to make it technically possible. And we also did that analysis. And on the right-hand side, you see that the bar called total. And even in 2021, we saw that 40% of this specific fleet was, from an economic and technical perspective, electrifiable. If we had a look only on the economic part, it's something like 80%. However, those second 40% were not technically possible in 2021. Today, with, I don't know, 600 kilowatt hours of battery, most of them would be. Okay. Then, maybe given the short time, the third topic, electricity grid connection. Well, this is somehow the probably most complicated question since it is really dependent on the specific location. However, the general quote is typically something like, everybody's telling us depot charging will be the main charging location. Our grid connection is serving enough electricity for our lights, but not for megawatt charging. And this is, at least for many companies, certainly true. However, to have an opinion on whether it is possible or not, we first need to understand how much energy is really needed and when it is needed. And I took an example of a depot with approximately 50 trucks. And the logistic case that is behind this depot is something like some of the trucks are driving in one shift operation and some of them are in two shift operation, so having quite a high mileage per day. And what we see is basically the fleet is traveling in the morning. You see that on the left-hand side, the very first picture in the upper row. Trucks are driving in the morning hours. Some of them are coming back in the midday and need to be recharged for second shift operation. And in the evening hours, basically all of the trucks are back and need to be recharged. Some of them a second time, some of them a first time. The charging strategy in this case we used is quite simple. We just said, well, depending on the energy you need, you get either a 150 kilowatt charger or a 50 kilowatt charger. And interestingly, when we have a look into the load profiles in the lower row, we see that, well, in yellow, we have the load from the already existing buildings, and in green, we have the additional load from the trucks. And even this quite simple charging strategy leads to something like a doubling to tripling of the load. This means basically we need something like 40 kilowatt per truck on average. This is energy you need, sure, and a grid connection you need to have. But on the other hand, per truck, it's not that much. It's far beyond, let's say, megawatt scales for each and every truck. However, if the grid connection is really an issue, you can also optimize your charging strategy and do something like, planning your charging and optimize it. We did that in a just quite simple way and said, what's the minimum grid connection we need for that specific depot to electrify the whole fleet and to make every trip possible? And this optimization shows that approximately 1,600 kilowatt grid connection would be enough compared to the 2,500 or 3,500 partly that we had in the not optimized case. So there's a lot of space for optimization if you really need to reduce the grid connection. However, in some cases, even those, 1 megawatt additional power for 50 truck we have in this case might be complicated and needs to be planned and adapted right now to be available in 2 or 4 years, for sure. So what can we learn in summary? Well, technically, the majority of all trucks is potentially electrifiable from a technical and also from an economic perspective today. However, there might be difficulties, especially regarding grid connections and so on. But in my opinion, we should not say, well, this is complicated and we can't do that, but start right now with the easy cases. And if we have the easy cases, we will learn more and we will step by step also solve the more complicated cases. So this is basically the main message of this talk and of doing research in this topic for more than 5 years. Yeah, thank you for your interest on that talk. And if you have questions, just reach out to us and we will try to answer. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Daniel. That was indeed a very compelling presentation, and good to have the numbers also. What it clearly shows me is that indeed, as you've been saying, you've been studying this for 5 years, and it shows us that it not only can be done, but there are numbers already available. So we already have the lessons learned from the first few cases. And your call to the audience is, please start with the easy cases. But I mean, if you call the food logistics fleet in Berlin an easy case, I guess there's a lot that can already be done, right? That's basically what I take up from this presentation. So thank you very much. I will quickly go to Rishabh first now, and then hopefully we'll have a bit of time left at the end for some questions of the audience. And otherwise, I have some questions prepared for you as well. But Rishabh, basically, what you will be doing is, as I said before, at Cenex, we work for research and development projects, developing knowledge, and we would really like to freely share this knowledge and make it easy accessible to the audience. Even if you just have a few minutes to spare and you have no previous knowledge about this topic, we hope to make you the tools that will help you at least make the first steps and gain the very first ideas that you need to have. And I think, Rishabh, you are here to present one of those tools. So yeah, over to you.
Thanks very much, Sana. And maybe I can share screen. So this tool is called a KITE. So it's Key Infrastructure for Truck Electrification. And just to put in background of the previous studies or previous talks, it's really at the planning stage. So it kind of follows the pathway of what you need to do to electrify your fleet. As Daniel said, the majority of expected charging infrastructure is expected to be at the depot. And this tool is about mainly electrifying depots. As you get to the process of electrification, you come across 3 main steps, and the tool kind of follows these steps. So we start off with the fleet, and the main question is the vehicle that you're choosing, the electric version of it, capable of doing the mission? The next part is which type of charging infrastructure is needed at the depot to maintain operations? And the last, and maybe most important, is also how to finance it and how to think about that financing. So the case I'm going to present was actually presented by the Smart Freight Center. So it's a French company that's doing operations of about 100 to 150 kilometers per day. We'll just choose a simple case with 1 vehicle. It's a rigid truck with 2 axles, and it's 18 tons for dry goods and not refuse collection. And once you've chosen this, we can put in the 100 kilometers. And as Daniel described in his presentation, the standard shift of 9 to 5. And here you can see already what your truck is expected to be doing: driving, charging if it's a 22 kilowatt, and parking and driving. We can also see the vehicle range. So this particular one is the eActros 300, the smaller version. And you can see the state of charge of 100% is, of course, around 300 kilometers. But with daily operation of 100 kilometers, it's using only about 31%. So your battery state of charge at the end of the day will be close to 70%, using about 88 kilowatt hours per day. You can also see the amount of time that would take to charge the vehicle at different powers. So this would be on the DC. If you think, oh, actually, I didn't want to do 100. I think my vehicles on the worst day do actually 150. You can just change the values. It runs the numbers, and the new numbers will appear here in a couple of seconds. So we can see it. Yeah, 53% is now being used per day. But what's really needed to electrify this? There are a couple of extra options also. So I'm not going to get into it just to keep time short, but the default value is 15 and 15 years of operation. And that's what we're going to stick with also here. Just to pretend, I'm just picking a number. We have a 25 kilowatt grid connection. And the base load that we're continuously using for the office or other operations is, let's say, 4 kilowatt continuous. We don't currently have smart charging, and we are using just one AC 22 kilowatt connection charger without any solar on the site. And then again, the thing will show you the expected daily charging profile. So here we can see the vehicles going out in the daytime. So that's 9 to 5 shift. And when they come, of course, there's this big evening peak, and this is charging as quick as possible. And that already tells us that it's breaking the grid connection over here. One of the simplest things to do is to turn on the smart charging, and then you refresh, and then you can see that the charging is then split across the time when the truck is parked. So suddenly you're now within the grid connection, and you could actually charge many trucks with the same grid connection. It shows the value and the benefits of smart charging. You can also put in solar on your site and check it out. So you can put your location and it will calculate automatically. If we go into the next section on financing, just the challenge with electric vehicles, especially heavy duty, is that they're really expensive upfront, but they're cheap to operate per kilometer of driving. So that means that the investment costs upfront are really high, and that actually makes the financial case a challenge, but the low cost of operation brings the total cost of ownership down. So a lot of financing options to help cash flow is important, particularly for smaller companies, which are expected to struggle with this. Something like a standard loan duration I've chosen here is about 5 years, and we can see a typical cash flow curve across the 15 years of operation. In the first year, and you can see all the assumptions over here. So the vehicle purchase cost is about 300,000 euros. Then the loan duration is 5 years with a down payment of 12%. And then the loan for the vehicle is paid back over the initial 5 years, after which you pay only for the electricity, maintenance, and repairs of the vehicle. That makes operation quite low after the 5th year. In year 7, over here, we can see the battery needs to be replaced, and that's also included within the cost. If you would like to, say, not take a loan, for example, or change the loan interest rate, or change the down payment, for example, to 5% initial, this can just be added and it will update in real time to tell you. So, for example, you pay a much smaller fraction in the first year and split across the 5 years of loan duration. This makes it really visible for anyone who's doing financial planning for this sort of truck, for what the costs are involved, not just for the vehicle, but to finance it in case loans are required, to finance the infrastructure which is included in the first year, to pay for the chargers, the solar planning in case it's needed, and the electricity costs. Right now, we use default values for each country, which you can find over here. The cost in euro per kilowatt hour. If you have a better number which is suitable to your case, you can simply update the value over here, and you will get immediately refreshed the total cost of ownership of the whole thing based on your electricity cost, to which it's quite sensitive. And the final page shows really the results of the entire process. So it shows a bit of the cash flow itself of the entire fleet, because you can put in many vehicles and also many types of vehicles. The charging infrastructure requirement, what the fleet is doing, the inputs that you've put in, as well as something on the environment. So how much CO2 is being saved, as well as the air quality benefits in terms of saving of NOx emissions and particulate matter. So the main message is that if you have trouble planning out your electrification of your truck fleet, please make use of the tool. It's freely available. It's, we hope, accessible for everyone. It's got a lot of default values based on the latest numbers from the sector, including costs. And please make use of it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rishabh. Yeah, I just bragged already that it's freely available and easily accessible and all those things. But now tell us, so how does it work? Do you have to register? Do you have to make an account? How do we find this tool?
You just go to Cenex Tools, and then you will find it over there. The one to look for is the Next eTruck project, which has funded this. That's a European project, or the tool Kite. So it's key infrastructure for truck electrification. There's no need to log in. There's no need to do anything. You can just go to the URL. You don't need to download anything, nor do you need to provide any details. Please use it.
Okay, good. So hopefully that is indeed very easily accessible to all. We just got some questions in. I see that one of the questions was indeed, where can I find the tool? So we will also make that clear again in the LinkedIn invite for this webinar, so that everybody knows it. We started a little bit later, so we do have a little bit time to answer the question. So to start with the question from Wilfred Boelhouwer first, it's a question for Daniel. Is battery storage an economically viable way to reduce peak demand at charging depots for e-trucks? What would you say?
Well, technically, again, it depends. Scientific answer. No, just basically in some cases, a battery storage is the only solution to have enough power at a location to electrify a fleet. Whether this is economically viable depends on many different aspects. One is for sure, what is the actual available grid connection? Can I do some extra services like load shifting or something like that, so gain money from the energy market? Additionally to my truck charging, let's say, can I include solar power I already have with the battery storage? Yes, no, possibly. Is there a special tariff? We had that in Germany, I think, until last year or this year for a, let's say, homogeneous or flat demand for energy. So it's a lot of aspects that have to be considered to calculate whether a storage may help on that.
All right, thank you. And and then there's another question from Pradeep Sood. How does weight of batteries impact the payload carrying ability? That's a known question, right? Because if it influences the payload too much, that also does something economically. Michael, can I pass this to you?
And I think that the answer is a little bit. It depends. So in the UK market, we actually have a small payload derogation, which means it, in combination with the additional weight of the batteries, that sort of on, say, a sort of 40-ton vehicle, that you may be losing sort of a couple of tons of payload, and that's undoubtedly an issue for some operators, and that the obvious solution to it is potentially legislative in the short term, in terms of sort of increasing sort of vehicle carrying capacities. There are also technical challenges as well around sort of maximum axle weights. So we've seen sort of how the vehicles are loaded affecting how much can be carried on EVs as well, with some of the customers that we've worked with.
Yeah. Yeah, so basically we're hearing a lot of "it depends" answers, which means that we do have numbers, we do have lessons learned, but also each case is different, right? So that is challenging for truck operators. What would be your advice? What would be the first step when they think about transitioning to more sustainable, and they feel like, oh, I don't even know where to start? What would be your advice?
That for me, Sana, that
Yeah.
but I think that there's two aspects to it. Is that one is that there's an enormous amount of helpful and freely produced information from organisations like Fraunhofer and Cenex that don't have an interest in selling you anything in the same way that a sort of truck manufacturer or charger manufacturer might. And then the second thing that I would advise every fleet to do is to try and get their data in order, because whenever that we're doing sort of EV transition plans for clients, time and time again, that every client is surprised by some aspects of when you show them the sort of scope of their operations and sort of what their vehicles are actually doing. So operators who think that all of their vehicles are maxing out on payload every single day of the week, often not the case. That every single vehicle is covering sort of 800 kilometers a day or something like that, not the case. And so there's sort of variety within the duty cycles, which really clearly highlights sort of what's possible to execute today and tells you where to start.
Yeah, and that's also linked to what Daniel said, that there's often this picture that our trucks are running all day long and they're always completely full and it's efficient to the max. But that might actually be different if you actually start looking at the data. What would be your advice, Daniel?
Yeah, let's say, first of all, get a feeling of your fleet. As you already said, have a look into the data, play around with publicly available tools like the one that is offered by Cenex to get a first insight. And then it depends a little bit on the personal risk awareness, let's say. For example, we once had a mail from a milk shipper, and he said, well, I bought an electric truck, but now I do not have any idea where to charge. And we said, well, okay, that's nice, but yeah. And then we asked them a little bit, how long is your distance? What are you doing? So it's the really basic data. And then it came out, well, technically 22 kilowatt charging will be enough for that specific vehicle. And in retrospective, we thought, well, actually a good idea. He has that vehicle. He can buy a really, really cheap charging solution. 22 kilowatt is no problem at an industry area, let's say. And for sure, when he talks about the next 10 milk shipper trucks he wants to use, he needs to think about. But it was a nice way to understand the basic problems you might have with such a vehicle. The other way is to, let's say, do a big study, ask, I don't know, Cenex, Fraunhofer, whoever, there are so many people doing such studies, and ask for more details if you really need a more specific insight into your fleet. So these are basically two ways to solve the problem, to, let's say, learn from practice, or to do, let's say, a more scientific analysis and first try to understand where the problems might be. And then it's about finding partners for sure that might also take parts of this issue. I mean, a logistics company is typically not an energy provider and understands all the topics of energy for sure.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think we definitely have to round it off now, because we did use a little bit extra time of everybody. So thank you very much to Michael, Daniel, and Rishabh for being our speakers today. And thank you for the audience for your attention and your educated questions. That's very helpful always. And thank you, Pablo, who is not visible, for being our host. And I hope to see all of you again in our next webinar, because now we know we can do it. Number one is a wrap. So thank you all, and have a nice afternoon. Bye.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.